conversations, and I think people really should know about the situation, before deciding I'm gonna go join, the Bay Area crowd and do all kinds of stuff. Because even though the money is good, you have to pay a lot more to make to live properly. So and all the stress involved. My brother-in-law has to drive, even though the distance is only about 20 miles, 30 miles, he has to drive like an hour and a half every single morning and every single afternoon to go to work and get home.
20 miles?
20 miles, but you're stuck in traffic.
Dude, like the 101 freeway is like all that money in that area, and they can't even have a freeway without holes in it. I mean, it's pathetic.
Yeah,
It's the worst freeway. And 880, the two main freeways there on each side of the bay,
yeah.
garbage.
Is that because of the trucks?
Well,
It's
okay.
because they don't do shit. I don't know.
Let me ask you, when are they supposed to repair the road? It's used the whole day.
Maybe that's why. Yeah, I don't know. But
They
get
need
money for it. I mean, they get taxes for it.
oh, lots of taxes too.
When are they supposed to? Yeah.
Well, they have to invent with all of these high-tech companies. You would think that they can combine like a high-tech self-driving car with all the proper tool to do repair. So you just have a chain of
Like,
cars.
you detour it while you fix, and then and then fix that, and then you detour the next section. You can do that.
Yeah. Yep.
That's pretty
There are
smart.
solutions.
That's a good
They just
Yeah.
don't- there's not enough motivation
That's a good
because they get their
Yeah.
money either way as a government. I mean,
Well, they are getting most of the money from employees, because they have to live, they have to pay property taxes and whatnot. But they're not getting the money from Google. Google does not pay California state tax much, if any. Facebook, same thing. Lyft, same
otherwise they
thing.
would have left.
Yeah, yeah. You can go online and check how much taxes these high tech companies actually pay in terms of state tax. Not a whole lot, if any.
But their employees are paying state taxes.
Yes. So that's basically the main revenue for the state and the county is coming from these highly compensated people because they have to pay property taxes, they have to pay sale taxes, they have to pay gasoline taxes and whatnot. So those are California taxes, right? Yeah. So before we go back to App Inventor, I just want to kind of throw this out. Okay, it's not going to be something that we're going to do in this class. It's called Apache Cordova, and yes, it is from the same Apache organization that made a web browser for servers like many, many years ago. It's still going, but this is a different product. It's called Cordova, and what it does is instead of having to learn how to program in Java for Android apps and have to learn how to program in Swift for iOS apps, you have one single basically platform to develop your quote-unquote apps. And instead of having to learn how to do layout and design and whatnot in Android, and then have to learn the parallel thing in iOS, you just have to learn HTML and CSS. HTML, I think everybody knows what it is. CSS is cascading style sheet, which is kind of like a design kind of thing. You can look up, they're open standards. Go to w3c. Cannot remember, or org or com, and they will talk about CSS and whatnot. So you design everything just like it is a website, but if you have logic to include in your app, you can do all of those in JavaScript. JS stands for JavaScript. And yes, JS is the first two. They are the first two letters of JSON, JSON. Okay, because JSON is JavaScript object notation. So this is JavaScript. Okay, so you basically have one single platform to make quote unquote an app that can run in a browser. You can run the whole thing in Firefox if you want to, but you can also, quote unquote export, or you can, there's a back end to crank out an APK file if you want to make an quote unquote Android app out of it. You can also send it the other way and crank out an iOS app out of it. So with one single platform, one single base, you can now crank out applications, on multiple platforms. It is not for everything. If you want to create, let's say, a first-person driving game, this would not be the platform to do it, okay? Because it basically is still kind of like a web interface. But if your objective is to make something along these lines, okay? So they got some sample code that is actually written, using this platform. None of these is like super duper, well known, okay? But they work, okay?
First, the first one. Pacifica.
First one is Pacifica Stress and Anxiety Relief. Yeah, it's based on CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness. Okay, so they got these apps, and then they got down here we got a chess game. Okay, they got the chess game, one verse Bible. Okay, graded. The easiest and prettiest way to check your grade from Home Access Center, which is probably specific to certain school districts and whatnot. I do not know. Phone Gap. You're using PhoneGap Build to develop apps, then Builder will be your new best friend. Rebuild, pull, and monitor, blah, blah, blah. Clever Baby, okay? It's the easiest way to track your baby's well-being, growth, and development. So I think they're just interacting with some kind of a database so that you can enter the data, have a log, and you can plot the trend and whatnot and stuff like that. So they're not super duper highly user interactive kind of app, but they're apps nonetheless. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about Cordova much in this class, other than just introducing there is such a thing. But this is going to be something that I'm going to use in the Design Hub because there's one app that we have to write maybe in this semester or the next semester, and I want my students at the Design Hub to use this tool instead of having to spend a lot more time to learn, Android, the Android SDK, or the iOS SDK, and the new programming language. This is like easy to do. Okay, so I'm just going to leave this at that. Just an introduction to mention that it is available, but it's not the main point of this class. Yeah, I think so. All right, so what we'll do next, we're missing at least 2 people, but I'm going to have to get started here. It's getting recorded anyway, so it's probably okay. So we'll go ahead and continue with our discussion last time. I mentioned the use of TinyDB. So what we'll do today is to actually make use of TinyDB. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start a new project. Okay, I'm going to start a new project called just Counter. Okay, which is kind of resembling the original Counter app. Okay, you guys still remember the Counter app? Where we have it's just click, click, click. A number goes up by itself. So what we'll do today is to rewrite the Counter app, except it remembers the counter. You can shut down the app, you can reboot the phone, and you restart the app. It remembers where it was. Okay, so we'll add that one little functionality to the Counter app to illustrate how to use TinyDB. Is that okay? So does everybody understand, what the focus is? Okay, all right. So we'll go ahead and put this together, in a kind of quick way. So we'll go ahead and change screen 1 and not to display the title. Okay. Where is that scrollable? Show list as JSON. Show status bar. Title visible. Okay, I'll turn it off. Because I think for most apps, it's just kind of awkward to show the title of the screen. If you really do need a screen title, you can make it yourself, right? Okay, so we'll just kind of take it out, and just for simplicity, we'll just pull a big button here, okay? And the button is, I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger so it's easy for people to hit. And we'll change the font size to something that's a lot bigger than what you would normally use, just to make it so that it's kind of the centerpiece of the whole thing. The other thing is, if you think, I don't like the button to be aligned to the left and top, I would like this button to be right in the center of the entire screen, there's an easy way to do it. Because in the screen 1 property, you can actually control that. So you can go back to screen 1, And just look down the properties. There's one place, if I remember correctly, right there. So align horizontal, you can say center. And then you can also use center for vertical. So now your button is right in the middle of the entire screen. So are we good so far with this? All right. And obviously the first number for the counter is not going to be text for button 1. So we'll change that to just 0. Okay. You can do that programmatically, but I'm just doing it here just so that I can have an idea of how big the button look the way it is. Now, if you say, if your entire app only has one button, you might want to make it even bigger, right? So by changing the font size to 56, okay, it's a little bit bigger. And let's try to double it again. 112. Okay, I'll settle with that. Okay, all right. So now that the basic screen layout is done, I mean, this is really our entire screen. Okay, it's just a single button. Okay, we'll talk about how to reset the button later, but it only has one single button, which is used for displaying the current count and also for triggering the count up to the next number. All right, so we go to blocks here, and before we incorporate TinyDB, let's just do the regular counter thing, make sure that works, then we add the ability to remember the count. Okay, so we go to button 1, and we say that when it's clicked, we just want to increment the number by 1. So the way to do that is I don't need a global variable because the text inside the button is the value that I want to track. Okay, so I'm using that trick here. So we go to the text property of the button, and it depends on how you want to write your program or code. You can basically just get the text first, okay, and then you decide, hey, it's a number, and I want to add 1 to it. Okay, so you go to math and pull out the addition block, okay, and you say I just want to add the number inside the text of button 1 by 1. Okay, so you pull a constant of 1. Well, once we change it, it becomes 1. There we go. So the result of this calculation, so that there are several things happening with this block here. The first thing is, even though the text inside button 1 is officially a string or text, but because it is used inside a context that requires a value, a numerical value, there's a conversion that is automatic. Okay? In App Inventor, unlike many other languages, there's no explicit way to say, I need to extract the numerical value of this thing. It is just automatically done. Okay? So now that we have a number, which is the value of the text of the button, we can now say add 1 to it, okay, which makes it 1 more than what it used to be. So what do we do with this? Well, we will just use it to set the text property of a button. So we go back to button 1, and then we go to set text of button 1, pull out this block, and connect this to here. Then we have our most basic counting mechanism done. Okay, so before we say that yes, this is done, let's go ahead and play with it first. So we say build, and I got my charger cable just disconnected, so I need to, there we go. And then I'm gonna go to my command line here and first run a screen copy so you can see the screen of the phone. There we go. And then we go to my Android SDK platform tools folder, and I think we are ready to get our package. Oh, no, it's still working. There we go. Okay, so it's counter.apk. Save it to my temp folder. switch back to the text interface, and then we say adb install -r, and then wherever I put that file, which in this case is my temp folder. Get it uploaded, installed, and now we switch back to the app, okay, to the mobile device. And this is the last program, so we're gonna get out of this one, and then that one. So now this time it's counter, okay, so this is the counter app. So when I click this button, you can see how, it just keeps incrementing, okay. But the counter value is not persistent, okay? It's volatile, okay? So if I back out of this app, okay, I press the back button, get out of it, and then go back in again. Oops, okay, this is the other app. Go back into this one. I lost count. So that may not be a good thing, okay? Because if there are many reasons why your app may, quote unquote, may be terminated. So let's just say that halfway through running this app, I'm standing at the door of Costco. I'm that person who checked people's membership and clicked the counter, and then suddenly I got a text from my wife, who says oh, we need to pick up this and this and this after you're done with your work from Costco, right? That usually involves rotisserie chicken. That's the most protein you can buy for $5. And we also use the bones, and also the parts that we don't want to eat, and make soup, make broth out of it. Yep. So nothing is wasted. For $5, okay. And then the container itself, can come in handy too. It is surprising how watertight those plastic containers are, even without a seal. Okay, they were just so well made with high precision. You can actually put water in it and shake it around, and it doesn't leak. Really? Because if it did, the trunk of my Miata would smell like rotisserie chicken or rotting rotisserie chicken all day long. Yep. So anyhow, so let's say I'm that guy, okay? So my wife texts me, I went to the text thing, and then I text back, and so on and so forth. And then so the thing about Android is, if you're doing one thing with one app, and then you use another app, it depends on how much memory you have, okay? If your mobile device only has 2 gigs of RAM, okay, and it's not enough for several apps to run at the same time, it will automatically kick out an app in order for the new app to kick in. So if the messaging app, takes up too much space, and my wife asks, so where is blah blah blah? I look up your Google Map and answer that text. I may lose this app entirely. So when I quote unquote get back to this app, it will just basically just restart itself. Then I would have lost count. Okay, and then Costco may not be too happy about that, because I just lost count. We were already counting up to 671, and then we went back to 0. Okay, so how do we fix that problem? Well, we fix that problem by using a TinyDB. Okay. So that term is kind of interesting. Why do they call it TinyDB? It's not even a database. Okay, so you go to storage to get TinyDB. So I'm going to drag and drop a TinyDB component into here, and you can see that it does not get into the screen itself because it is a invisible component or non-visible component, as it is listed here. So TinyDB is not visible, which means it doesn't interact directly with an end user. Okay, it's just a resource that your code can use to store something so that it's persistent. Okay, all right. So now we go to the blocks. There's not much we can do, over here, except when you click on it, the property allows you to change the namespace of TinyDB1 to some other namespace. For the most part, you don't want to mess around with the namespace unless you want to maintain multiple TinyDBs. Then you can mess around with the namespace so that you can have multiple TinyDBs within the same app, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but if that's what you want to do, you can do it. So now we go to blocks, and the first thing we need to do is to say, if there is a saved value in TinyDB, let's retrieve that and put it into the button when we first start up the app. So that means we have to associate that code with screen 1's initialization event. So we go to screen 1, we go all the way to the top, and then we look up initialize. Okay? So this block basically starts execution as soon as the app is started. Okay? So now inside here, the first thing we do is to go to TinyDB1 and say, well, do we have an actual count stored somewhere in here? And the way we do that is to have one of these calls. So let me just kind of quickly go over the purple blocks. The first one is pretty clear, okay? It just erases everything that you have in the TinyDB database, okay? The second one is to clear a particular tag. Now, when they call a tag, I don't really like the inconsistency when they say key value in some place and then this is tag value in other place. A tag is no more than just a key. Okay, it is how you identify a particular item. So when you see the word tag, it really means the same thing as a key. Okay, as in the key value pair. So clear tag basically just means if we have stored something under a particular key, now it is erased. Okay? If it doesn't exist in TinyDB to begin with, nothing happens. There's no error. Okay? The third one basically allows you to retrieve all the tags in a particular TinyDB. So it will give you a list of all the tags, so then you can retrieve each one individually. Okay? The next one retrieves a particular tag. So you supply whatever tag you want to retrieve, and there's a third argument here that says value if tag not there. So this value is returned to indicate, hey, the tag that you ask me to retrieve does not exist in the database. So you have to be very careful about this value if tag not there, because in some cases, it makes sense and go like, oh, if there's no previous count, let's just return 0. It makes perfect sense, right? But in some other cases, you might have to really think about what value to specify to indicate it is not found, okay? Because it may not be easy to differentiate this value that you supply here than a legitimate value that you can store in TinyDB. Yes?
Put a string right in there?
Yeah, you can put a string. It can be any string, but you have to make sure that string does not match something that you can potentially actually store in your TinyDB. So that gets a little bit tricky, depending on your app, depending on what you want to store. The last one, obviously, is just to store. So you supply the value that you want to store, and you supply the key that you want to associate that value to, and that stores the value into TinyDB. Now, all of these purple blocks are what we call synchronous, which means the block does not come back until the operation is done. So when it comes back, it means, yep, we got it. Okay, it is already stored. So this way you don't have to worry about, well, what if I trigger this block and then the app got closed? Is the value actually stored? Okay, so that would not happen. All right, so let's go ahead and play with these. Okay, so in the initialize block, I definitely want to retrieve an existing value from the from TinyDB. So, but I want, excuse me. So I might want to specify a 0 as my default value to come back. If there's no entry in the TinyDB, I'm just going to say, oh, okay, let's make that 0 then. Okay. So now we have to decide what tag or what is the key that we want to use. Well, it doesn't sound very difficult, right? I mean, we can just put a constant here and just say, count, okay? Now, there's a problem with this approach. If I use a literal string here in order to retrieve a value from TinyDB and use another literal string later on to store to TinyDB, if I have a typo, then the program is not going to work. Okay, so I'm going to use this approach first, and then I'll tell you guys how to avoid that problem from happening in the first place. Okay, you have seen those problems?
No, I haven't. I just think.
I do it all the time. You know, typos. You know.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so we have this.
Doesn't it correct you?
Hmm?
No, it's not other things. There's sometimes where App Inventor will give you the right name.
Like suggested.
Yeah.
That's your type.
Okay, so we need to get rid of this one. Okay, and let's dash this one here. Okay, so with this, you know, what it's going to do is every time we start up the app, it will check TinyDB first and ask, well, do we have a value associated with the key count? If so, tell me what it is, and I'm going to use it to initialize the button, the text in the button. If not, okay, just pretend that we did, and it is 0. So 0 is kind of like the default value if there is no existing value, which makes perfect sense for this particular app. Okay? And then the other thing we're going to do here is to say after each time, after we click, we're going to save it. Okay? So we'll store the value after each click. And you know, the tag is going to be the same as this count. So I'm going to pretend to be my usual self, you know, and just, you know, copy and paste here, except I forgot that it is count with a lowercase c, okay? And then the value that we want to store is whatever the text is in the button one. So we just go to button one, and go to its text value, retrieve the text value of button one. I could have just duplicated this block, you know, same thing, okay? And yeah.
Every time you click it, it's gonna store it.
Yep. Which is fine, because you know you might have 1,000 clicks a day or something like that. You know, that's okay.
This is local though, right?
Huh?
This is local, right?
Local?
Without internet.
No, this is not in to the internet. This is stored locally on the phone.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
The database is on your phone?
yeah,
TinyDB?
yeah. It is actually not a real.
You weren't here.
Is it
yeah.
compressed and stuff?
No, it's just a text file.
Oh, so
It
it
just
doesn't
seems
matter.
inefficient.
It is kind of inefficient, but it's okay for this app because you cannot really click that fast.
Yeah.
The values are so small.
Yeah. Now, if you do not like this approach and you say, okay, you know, maybe after every minute, we can do that. Okay, so we'll talk about, you know, other mechanisms to save the value. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you set it so that when the program shuts down, if you're not doing it right, like you switch to your text message,
Yes.
like you said,
So the answer to that question is a little bit tricky because in a proper Android app, the answer is yes. You can catch the event right before the Android operating system is about to kick the app out. Okay, you can catch the event and go like, oh, okay, I better save everything now. Okay, but in App Inventor, it doesn't give you that hook to specify the logic and go like, oh, I need to save now, because it just doesn't have that. It cannot catch that event. We can take a look. I mean, we can take a look at screen one because you know, if anything, it's going to be one of the events associated with screen one, which is basically, you know, the quote unquote the app.
I saw one that said close screen animation.
Close screen animation.
So it's probably like
Oh, that's just animation. You're just controlling whether you want the animation or not. So, yeah. So
it's like when that happens, you can use it.
yeah, no, it's going to be one of these kind of like beige brown blocks here. Back pressed, nope.
That's like the closest, right?
Yeah, but back press means you know, the end user has to click that button in order to trigger this event. So if you are in this app and then you go run, you know, Google Maps and then you Google search, and then you know another heavy-duty app and this app has to be kicked out, it's not going to trigger the back pressed. We got.
You know, one fail safe, you just remember to exit it manually.
Yeah. Yep. But it's not going to catch the ones you know, that we are more concerned about, which is you know, it's not under your control. So we got error occurred, initialize, other screen closed, not this one, but other screen closed, permission denied, permission granted. screen orientation change, so we do not have a hook for that. Now, if you write it in Android SDK, then you do have that hook, okay, along with many other things you can do. But in App Inventor, we just do not have that ability. So for now, we'll just kind of go with this, okay, and see whether it works or not. I'm not sure whether TinyDB is case sensitive or not. We can just kind of look it up. So TinyDB App Inventor case sensitivity. The tags are case sensitive. Okay, so this problem should show up. Okay, so we'll go ahead and switch back to App Inventor and build the app again. Okay, so we switched to the mobile device, started the app, starting with 0. That's perfectly fine. So we do some counting, and then we press the back button. Now remember, the logic is now saving it for every single click, so it should have saved it. Okay, so press the back button, and then press counter again. It's not doing it. Okay, well, it's because I got the wrong case. Okay. And this kind of problem can take a long time to debug, especially when your app is more complicated and you got a lot of variables and whatnot. But in this case, because the app is relatively simple, okay, there are only so many ways things can go wrong. Okay, so we go like, oh, this is actually lowercase c. But the problem has to do with I have to type count several times. And each time I type count, I could type it slightly differently. Okay. So that means, I need a more systematic way to solve a problem like this. So the best way to do it, now this is something that I just recommend. You don't have to do it this way. But the way I would like to do it is to use a global variable for the name of that counter. So I'm just going to change the name and say, count tag, okay? And it is just set to one of these two, okay? Pick one to be the actual name of that tag. So now we take out both of these, and then every time we want to refer to the name count as a tag for that TinyDB item, I'm just going to use the value of the global variable. So this way, I could mistype it here, but it doesn't matter because it will still be used consistently. Whatever I use to store is going to be whatever I use to retrieve. So the key is consistency. Now, in most other programming languages, they would say, oh, this really should not be a variable, it should be a constant. But App Inventor does not have the concept of a constant, so there's no way to, quote unquote, prohibit updating this particular value. So I just have to be careful with that. Now, if you want to remind yourself something is a constant and you should not be updating it, I would advise this, okay? You can basically just add const as a part of the name of the global variable. So this way you're now reminding yourself, do not change it. This is supposed to be a constant. Okay? So there are ways to kind of help in the process, because if you have a lot of variables, it's difficult to remember which one is which one. So you might actually have a count variable that is supposed to change. It is a number, and so on and so forth. But by naming the variable as const, okay, and with a tag after that, you're reminding yourself how it is supposed to be used.
So it automatically changes it throughout the whole program?
But no, it makes sure your whole program uses the same tag consistently. Question?
I'm just not. Can you scroll up a little bit? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's the entire program.
You're initializing the variable to count.
To the string count.
Why? So that's just replacing those tags with
Yep.
the word count.
Yeah, so I don't have to. I cannot misspell it anymore.
No, I get that.
Yeah.
I get why you're doing it, but can't you just create a variable and put the variable in there instead of making a variable a string? I don't know. It just seems weird. I don't know why.
Well, the tag has to be a string because it's the key of the value that you're storing into TinyDB. So it has to be a string.
Yeah, I forget it's a key. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So now, well, I only do these things because I've been bitten by this kind of bug many, many times. There's no such thing as being wiser. It's just that I have made all kinds of mistakes and I learn from those mistakes. Yeah. In other words, someone who said, I have never made a single mistake in my entire life probably has not learned a whole lot. Because you can do that. You can avoid failure by not doing anything. So don't look at failure as a bad thing. Just look at it as I might have learned something unintentionally. Now, of course, some failures may not be recoverable, so that may not be a. So those are exceptions to the rule. Like, yeah, like mistakes like I forgot to change the tires of my car, and then it lost control and then fell off a cliff. Those would be unrecoverable kind of mistakes. So yes, during that 4 second of free fall off the cliff, you have learned something new, but you may not have a chance to actually utilize what you have just learned. All right, so let's go ahead and rerun this. Okay, there we go. So here's our counter app again. So we click, 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 click. Okay. So this time I'm going to try something different. Okay. So what I'll do is I will go back to my main screen here, do some random search. Okay. Maybe watch some news. Okay. This one has not been set up to do a news feed yet. So we'll go ahead. Oh, okay. So it has suggestions already. Ethiopian airline Boeing 737 MAX 8 accident. Okay, so we go here. We click on a few links. Start up Chrome. Chrome is pretty heavy duty. Default app selected. Okay, fine. Yeah. Okay. All right. So by this time, our app should be kicked out, okay? Because Chrome is pretty heavy duty. If we suspect that is not happening yet, okay, then we go to the Google Apps and find something that's also heavy duty, like Maps. So the intention is go do something that is very likely to push, the RAM to the extent where our first app is no longer running in the background anymore. Okay. So we got app here, we got maps here. So I do the back button on maps, back button, back button, back button, and I cannot back all the way to the app, the counter app. But if I click on how should I put it? Yeah, so if I click on the button to show this, it might still show counter here, okay, which is misleading. Because this counter, okay, it's still running, okay, it has not kicked it out yet. So counter is still running. Huh?
I mean, didn't you just set it up for it to
Oh yeah, you're right.
How would you know?
Okay, so I have to exit it all, actually, man, you got, that's a good point. We could not tell. Because if it does restart, it restarts like that.
Right?
Yep. So in order to differentiate whether it was still running or whether it restarted, we can put a message, like a very short message when it first starts.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you swipe it out on that
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, but it does work. Even though I pressed the back button this time, it came back with the same counter. Now, of course, now we have a separate problem because now, how do I reset the counter? It just keeps going up, and there's no way to reset it, right? Well, let's go back to the code. Okay, so we're gonna use the code and have a way to reset it. And the idea is I want the user interface to look very clean and very kind of not uncluttered, right? So what I'm gonna do is I go to blocks and say, let's use a long click to reset the counter. So we go to button 1, and then we use a long click to trigger the reset of the counter. So with a long click, we are going to, okay, I'm just going to borrow this block here, set the text back to 0, okay, throw that away, and put that here. But I also have to remember to reset what I have stored in TinyDB. So that's what I'll do. So now with a long click, it's going to reset the counter. Yep.
Do you want to make like a message on the initialize that says app started or something?
Okay, that's a great idea. So to do that, we'll make use of a notifier. Okay. So we'll go back to the designer, and then we go to user interface, and then drag a notifier into the app. So notifier is also, quote unquote, is known as a non-visible component because until you call and start to use it, it remains like not there. Okay, it's not a part of the screen. Okay, so now we go back to the blocks, and during the initialization, we'll just pop up a message that kind of dissolved on its own. So in the initialize block, we go to notifier 1, and then we say, okay, show alert. Okay. So even though it's not really an alert, this is just how App Inventor calls that, and then we'll just put a constant text. I could make it more fancy, but since the purpose is really just to differentiate, did we restart the app or not? Okay, so we just put a message here and say the counter app is starts. Okay, all right, there we go. Okay, so we have made some modifications. It's time to test it again. So this is the one thing that I really want to encourage people to practice is don't try to make a lot of changes before tests, between tests. Okay, make a little bit of modifications, add a little code, test it. Okay, if it works, go back and make more additional changes. But if it doesn't work, debug it. Okay. The reason why I want to really emphasize this is because in the hackathon event, like 2 weeks ago now in San Francisco, one of the things that one of the teams did was they were just coding and coding and coding and coding without any type of debugging. So when they first ran the code, the first problem they ran into was the platform itself. It wasn't even the bug of the program. It was, oh, this type of Google App Engine cannot work with the configuration that we need. So now they have to change the Google App Engine configuration, and that turned out to be a big problem because now the development cycle, which was relatively short, became like 10 minutes. Because in order to update or deploy the app, it took 10 minutes. So they can only debug every 10 minutes. And that was like an hour before the deadline of the entire hackathon. So that was not pleasant because if they had used kind of a more incremental approach and just go like, okay, we got something, let's test it. We got something, let's test it. They would have discovered this problem like 13, 14, 15 hours ago. And then they would have sent one person to look into that issue while everybody else continued to develop. Huh? So all of these things are, recommendations are based on observations, of, what people actually encounter. All right, so we start counter, and you can see how it says the counter app starts, and that is supposed to dissolve. Okay, very good. Now we want to reset. Okay, so long press, and it resets. Okay, so the other thing that we want to do now is go like, but somebody could have just long pressed it by accident. Okay, because it's in the pocket, the phone was not turned off. Da 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 da. Okay, so we'll deal with that later. Hmm?
Dog did it.
The dog did it. Yep. So we'll go ahead and start up some apps here. Okay. So we look at calendar. Okay. Great. Okay. And then we do a Google search, or let's see. Oh, I can do this. I can just go back here, go to maps again, and you can see how map restarted, right? So, and then we'll do some search here, just to make sure that we chew up more memory. So we are looking for sushi for lunch. Okay, cool.
That looks like a good one.
This one is good actually. Shige.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shige is very good. It's very difficult to find.
Listed as comfort food?
If you like sushi.
I mean, yeah, but that's like relevant. That applies to anything.
Yeah, I
It's
guess.
comfort food.
Yeah. And then we'll go to Google. Okay, so we go
Hey,
to.
while you're looking at stuff and chatting and surfing the web, do we have access to the phone in App Inventor?
The phone in App Inventor.
Yeah, I guess I got
You mean the emulator phone?
no. I was just thinking the other day. I was thinking of an app to make for fun. I didn't actually look to see if it already existed, but like a system for blocking robocalls, but not just
Oh.
blocking them, but dealing with them. But they would have to intercept the phone call.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking that you could like implement, your own robo answer of like a quiz,
Mm-hmm.
like a pop quiz, of maybe one question, but it would
Ooh.
eliminate.
Since you mentioned robocall, this article is good, so I can chew up even more memory. Okay. So
I hear
robocall,
websites for it.
and let's see, who was the comedian who did this? It's not Colbert. It is
It was
I scam them all the time.
the guy with
not
British
Sunday
accent.
night.
What's his
It
name?
was on Sunday. That's what I thought of.
Jim Cash.
No, John Oliver.
Yes, Oliver. That's it. There we go.
It was his special on Sunday. That's why I thought of it.
It is funny.
It is great.
Yeah, robocall. Okay,
The big
so
button, yeah. So good.
so this is great. Okay, John Oliver fights robocalls by robocalling Ajit Pai and the FCC.
He set up every 90 seconds to call them. He's such.
Well, okay,
I
so
love this guy.
well, Ajit Pai is if you dig up his employment history, before he became the head of FCC, he was he a
I don't
con?
remember, but
He was a lawyer for one of the big communication giants, AT&T or something like that.
that's why he's always talking shit about AT&T all over. Like,
Yeah,
he rips them apart. He has this giant Reese's mug or whatever he was showing.
yeah, it's funny. I'm not gonna talk about nicknames here, because that's that's not kind. But let's just say that Ajit Pai has a interesting nickname.
He was saying in the segment that Ajit actually voted against regulating them. Like he made it so that it's worse now. And then he became head of FCC.
Of course, corporations put their people into the government to help deregulate, everything, so that the corporations can make more money with more freedom. They do the same thing with the meat industry, put their people into the FDA,
Yep.
and then they change the food pyramid appropriately to list all the profitable products. If it's not profitable, it is not on the menu or the food pyramid.
Yeah, like a CEO or something of Monsanto became like the head of the FDA. Like
Yep.
that's kind of a conflict of interest to me.
Yeah, the meat industry, basically said, Well, as we understand, the FDA does not have enough money to hire all the agents to do the inspections. Trust us, we know how to do it. Okay, we'll just inspect ourselves and call it good. Yeah. Okay, so now we can go back to our app. So I'm using this interface to go back to the app. Okay, so here's the counter app, and it did not restart. Okay, I just didn't have enough stuff to push it out.
Watch a video.
To watch a video.
Watch the John Oliver video.
Yeah.
All right,
Watch
let's.
the segment. I think if you went back one, there was the videos up top.
Oh,
Like when you did the original search, there were videos.
okay,
up top.
gotcha.
Google response.
So we go back one level. Nope. Okay.
Maybe when it does it when it opens a new window, you don't know.
Now we have we have Google, right?
There you go.
There we go. Not sure whether this is loud enough for you guys to hear. Nope, that's not a video.
Tricked you.
Hmm?
They tricked us.
It got censored.
I wouldn't be surprised.
There we go. Come on.
But he's on HBO, so they do a lot of it.
Come on.
Oh, shit.
Well, it's
I can't even watch it with my kids around. It's so like bad.
well somewhere it is playing, but I can't see it.
At the top of the page.
Well, now they block off so much for the cookies and the breaking. I mean, there's like, yeah, there you go.
Oh, there we go.
So limited space now.
Well, comedian John Oliver wants the FCC, Bob, to do something about robocalls, so he has come up with a robocall of his own to get their attention. Listen.
If only there was a way to get the FCC's attention on this issue. Of course, one way to do that would be, hi FCC, this is John from customer service. Congratulations, you've just won a chance to lower robocalls in America today. Sorry, but I am a live person. Robocalls are incredibly annoying, and the person who can stop them is you. Talk to you again in 90 minutes. Here's some bagpipe music.
Crazy part.
John
He's gotten a
Oliver
lot of
says he
stuff
will
done
send that
because
to
of
the
what he does.
FCC commissioners every 90 minutes. There it is. Big finger on the red button. He had a giant hand press a big red button to get the call started. He said robocalls are so easy. It only took his tech guy, Bob, 15 minutes to work this out.
Really?
His HBO show is owned by our parent company, Warner Media.
I'm telling you, I get 3 a day at least, and the first 6 numbers are always the same as my phone number. It's like, you know right away, like,
60% of all mobile phone calls are
do
now
they work?
robocalls.
I mean, like,
I would not be surprised. Yeah, because I get a lot of those too. Okay.
People are like, why are your phone always on Do Not Disturb? I'm like, because there's no point to answering the phone anymore. They did a little
Nope,
segment
it's still
of, like,
there.
Somebody fake calling somebody and
Your
asking
text
for their
won't come
mom.
in and stuff, though.
What?
Then your text won't come in and stuff, though. Like, what if someone's really trying to get a hold of you? They can't. You know?
I put anybody important on favorites list.
Yep.
That they go through. Like
Yep.
my wife, my nanny.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
And
okay.
then
You have a
You're not fully in the airplane mode.
not airplane mode.
not airplane mode. You're on this do not disturb mode.
Yeah.
So and in do not disturb, they have a setting. Yeah, they have a setting where you can say, is it absolute do not disturb, or is it like, priority calls can go through, and then they will ask you how do you want to qualify, someone as, who can go through. You basically just say
Twice in a
fave.
row, sometimes.
Yeah, 3 times in a row within like X many minutes, or it is on your starred list. Yeah, it's really handy, because like right now, I have do not disturb turned on, because it's during class time. But if my wife, has an emergency and has to call me, it will go through.
That's how I have it set.
Yeah,
I mean, I just added my boss last week. And
Yeah.
Literally, I was about to take him off.
yeah.
I'm like, stop calling. Like,
Why did you do that to your boss?
because he's a sales guy and he's just annoying. Like, it's something you could type up in a second, but he like wants to take your time. Like, phone calls are so annoying. I mean, for me, I can only do a phone call and only do a phone call. with like a message. I can switch quickly. I can do more than one thing at once.
Mm-hmm.
He'll be like, "Should I click this button? Like, really, you're calling me for this?" No, you're going back on Do Not Disturb list.
That call could be a big part of the day, though. You know, it's different for everyone.
I mean, I've known him long enough, and I'm just like, I
Yeah.
can't do it. I
Sorry,
tried.
bud.
I'm sorry, dude. You lost your privilege.
Okay, since you mentioned that,
He's called like 3 times every day. Like, hey, stop it.
Oh, look at this.
I'm trying to find the. I'm trying to find the pointy hair boss with a notebook computer. I think Wally was in it too. So let's look up Wally. Etch and scratch. Etch and scratch.
Is Dilbert
Sketch.
Judge? No, Scott Adams, obviously, he says right there.
There you go. My laptop computer is locked up. Can you help? Remember, you have to hold it upside down and shake it to reboot. Oh, that's right. I wonder if he'll ever realize we gave him an etch and sketch. Scott Adams, that's his name. Scott Adams was he's a very smart man. He was one of the very few people who said, Trump was gonna win. He saw, certain signs, and he analyzed the whole situation, and he said, well, Trump is going to win when everybody said, no way, he is not, there's no way he can win. So Scott Adams was, he's interesting. He's an interesting person.
Judge based off of Space off Dilbert, right? That's why I'm getting him mixed up. I think he said it's based off of Dilbert comics, I'm pretty sure.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It says it in the movie, I think, inspired by whatever. Mike Judge, I just saw Reddit top 10 richest cartoonists. I'm surprised he was like number 8. He was actually up there. I never knew he actually made that much money.
Didn't you do King of the Hill and stuff?
You're right. I think he did. You're right. And he
Yeah,
also,
that's
he has
King of the
Silicon Valley right now, which is one of my favorite shows.
Oh,
That
yeah.
show's so good.
And of course, the other XKCD is the other comic, that's kind of like a must-read for geeks.
I never heard of it.
Never heard of it. Oh, okay. Well, now you have more ways to kill time.
I am now. We're just trying to kill the app. Oh no, we're on your screen.
Yeah. Today we are looking for a lunchbox, a snow globe, a Maytag dryer, and a Harley Davidson and a stamp. My hobby: collecting one item from every category listed in Wikipedia's list of collectibles. But they have some, really funny ones.
I don't get this that way.
I do.
I mean, it made me giggle, but
Yeah, but they have a lot of interesting ones. I think they got one on gamers too. Like game programmers, game developers, or wannabe. Yeah, it's really funny. All right. Well, getting back to this stuff here. So are we good with this app?
we didn't get it to close, did we? In the end.
We did not get it to close. That is correct.
That's the whole point.
Yep.
Yeah. What happened? We watched the video. Did we even look afterwards?
Yeah, it was still working afterwards. Yeah.
I was like, okay, I wasn't sure if we actually looked.
Yeah, it was still working, so we couldn't kick it out. Okay, so we want to add one more thing. Okay, and this one, yeah, we can do it in about 10 minutes. When we long press, we want to pop up a screen and say, are you sure you want to reset? Okay, yeah, how about that? Okay, because we don't want to accidentally reset it, because that can be bad. Okay, so the way we do that is to use a notifier again. So in the long click, okay, now we have to break it up. Okay, I'm gonna take these blocks out of here, and we'll still use it later on. So that's why I'm not gonna erase it. I'm not gonna erase it, but instead we'll go to the notifier, and we'll get one of these blocks here. One of these will be applicable. Not show alert, okay? Show alert does not give the end user a chance to do something, like to specify, no, I did not mean this, okay? So we need to do something where the end user can choose. And of course, you can make it very annoying. Now, the simplest thing we can do, okay, we can make it very, very annoying. So we can use a dialog box like this, where you can cancel, okay? So there's a cancel button. We can also use a, where's the other one? Progress, message, choose. Oh, where is it? Oh, text dialog box. There we go. So if you really want it to be extremely annoying, but and say that this is for safety's sake, then you can show a text dialog. Now, in the text dialog, you can basically just present two random numbers, and say, to confirm that you want to reset this counter, enter the sum of these two numbers.
I was thinking
Yes.
we, in our reset dialog, set to where you type in a new value and it'll reset with that value
Oh, okay.
into the text. Therefore, like you want to start at 500, or you like did
Well,
long
okay.
You want to
press.
cheat your count at Costco?
If you
Okay.
accidentally,
Before you do that, can you click on TinyDB? I could have swore I saw something in there that was related to this.
You mean to reset?
No, not to reset. To clear all, store value.
I don't think so, because it doesn't interact with end
I saw
users.
something that was like confirm override or something like that.
Nope. TinyDB cannot do that.
Well, it should.
Well, that's why we have notifiers. We can do it ourselves, right? So you guys have several choices here, okay? As you said, we can use a text dialog so that we can ask the end user, okay, what value do you want to reset it to? And then we can put a 0 there as a default, but they can enter some other numbers. But the simpler way to do it is really just a choice, okay, where you can say one or the other, okay? Go ahead, or no, don't do it, right?
yeah, with the safety net, you probably don't need to reset it to a certain value anyways.
Right. Yep.
Just realized you never really answered my question about intercepting phone calls.
And intercepting phone calls.
Sorry.
Is that what we want to do? So if you want to intercept phone calls, it will be under connectivity. I'm not really sure whether it can do it or not. Maybe not here. Storage, social. There we go. So under social, we have phone call. Okay. So there you have it. Let me go to more information. So phone call, if you read the documentation here, I know the text is a little bit small. A non-visible component that makes a phone call, so you can do the robocall. You can be John Oliver and do that robocall to a specified number in the phone number property, blah, blah, blah.
I need that for events.
Incoming call answered. Event indicating an incoming call is answered. Phone number is the incoming phone call number. Using this block adds dangerous permission that will require additional approval if your app is submitted to the Google Play Store. Phone call ended. Phone call started. So a phone call has ended.
The thing I hate the most is getting like 50,000 voicemails of like robots with
Yes.
like blanks first 10 seconds.
You get it. Actually, okay, you can do it.
Yeah, it seems
If you look at the third item, phone call started, if status is one incoming call is ringing and you get the number. So you can capture that and say, compare that to a whitelist and ask, do I want this call to proceed?
Can I look into this and maybe change my project?
Yeah, sure. I mean, absolutely. Yeah. The problem with App Inventor doing this is it may not be able to run in the background all the time.
That
So,
was actually another question I had. I wonder if other people had it. But like, is there a way to look at your battery consumption? Like, is there something built in that I can see like
To
how
App
much battery
Inventor?
I'm taking and how much battery I'm using
you mean in general or in App Inventor?
for my app that I'm making?
For your app that you're making? Yes, you can. So in most,
I make something that just like kills your battery in 3 hours.
yeah, you can do that. So you're talking about just in general. So in general, if you go to settings and then go to battery,
Okay, so it's in the phone. Is it
Device
a
maintenance.
person every
It's
day?
installed.
Like, how many times you gonna like come in?
device maintenance, and if you look at battery, Yeah, see, it shows, how much energy each app is taking. So usage per hour is 0%, we're not using much.
So that's useful, no?
Yeah, but this screen depends on your mobile phone too. Like my Asus, has a more detailed list. Like it would tell you your screen is using this much energy. This app is using this much energy. Blah blah blah. So it would basically give you a list sorted in a reverse order. So the most energy consuming thing is listed first. But yes, so it depends on your phone. You have to kind of look into your phone's setting. Even the way to find it is slightly different. So on this particular Samsung device, it is listed under device maintenance. But on my Asus, it has its own entry right under settings, which is battery.
Okay, I'll just look around for it, but it should
Yeah.
be there.
On iPhones?
Yeah. I just didn't think, I guess I didn't think about using
Yeah.
that
But,
as a
you,
wider.
but there's apps for that too, though. You could probably do that with App Inventor.
I'm gonna have to look into stopping robocalls.
That's a tall order if it hasn't been done by the FCC.
All right.
Yeah, I put it as hat. Create an app that intercepts them all or something.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll continue this next time. Like, how do we, make this safer and just ask for confirmation first. But I think we covered some pretty cool stuff today. So I'll stop the recording.